A lone sedan entered the parking lot of the processing plant and went dark. A tenebrous figure emerged from the shadows, sheathed in tactical garb and gripping an M4 carbine. He loaded a magazine and charged the weapon. Inside the plant, the night shift was in full swing. Dozens of employees performed duties when soft popping sounds reverberated throughout the complex beneath the warm hum of industry and personnel. One by one they fell, bleeding and broken. Some realized the horrifying reality and ran for exits, while others hid under tables and behind partitions, attempting to will away the moment's madness. The dark figure approached a station near the rear of the building and eyed a frightened girl ducking behind a workbench. He gazed at her longingly amidst the mayhem, then raised his weapon and beat her blind with the buttstock of the gun. A peculiar calm perfused the troubled space as the man walked away, kicking spent casings like seashells on a tranquil shore. He returned to the outside lot and passed into the shadows, leaving carnage and chaos in his baleful wake. Jasper Kane wanted to be a better father. He wanted to share the joy in life with his only son, Carl, as any father would. Jasper had loved hiking the winding trails of Mount Vern ever since childhood, when he had a free run of this magnificent range. He had not explored here in years, and it was certainly good to be back. The fresh, lovely, sweet juniper carried him back to youthful adventures on the mountainside of his childhood home. The morning air was crisp, and the sun angled through the tall, majestic pines, casting gold columns across the lush foothills. Jasper trod onward and upward, his backpack secured over his shoulders, his son at his side, and a solid maple walking stick in his grasp. It had been a tumultuous year of upheaval and change for the Kane family. As he and Carl stalked the mountainside, Jasper felt bewilderment at his life's course. Angela seemed distant and cold. They had been married for 20 years, and this distance was troubling. His son Carl had begun acting out in school, but young teenagers can behave erratically. The most important thing in life is family, no matter what, and Jasper wanted to instill this sentiment in Carl. He had growing concerns that Carl was slipping away from him. His mother would tell him things that just weren't true. Half-truths and full-on lies were filling Carl's head. Poison, thought Jasper. She was poisoning their son against him. I'm a good husband and father, thought Jasper to himself. It was not fair. Life was not fair. Perhaps another lesson Carl needed to learn. Jasper decided to come home and hike the trail because he knew he would find solace there. It was the only place where he could truly reflect on his circumstances and clear his head of all the crooked music that played inside. His muddled thoughts settled amongst the wild grasses swaying in the gentle mountain breeze, only to be stirred again by the redolence of the mountain trail. Jasper, shouted Marie Kane. Jasper! Marie was in the backyard of their country home, where she lived with her husband, Alfred. She called out to the forest and beyond, out to the base of Mount Vern, where Jasper, who had just turned 7, had surely run. That boy was always running off to the mountain when Alfred dealt with him in a disciplinarian sense. The neighbors on either side of the Kane residence had little to do with them, so Marie didn't bother asking them if they had seen Jasper. Besides, she knew where he was, up on those mountain trails blowing off steam. Perhaps it was for the best. As she turned to go back inside, a neighbor to the east was waving at her. "Could you please turn that music down?" shouted the neighbor. "I have my little one down for her nap." Yes, said Marie, gesticulating derisively. Alfred joined his wife in the yard, tightening his belt and adjusting his shirt. "Where'd the boy get off to?" asked Alfred. "He's probably off on those trails," said Marie. "He's quick, I'll give him that. I've got to go turn that music down." Alfred scanned the mountainous region that Jasper had disappeared into moments before. Then he began to hum a sinister serenade that only he could hear. Hash, hash, hash. There were many changes in Jasper's life over the years, but none came as quickly as in the last 6 months. The nagging allegations at work, his strained marriage, and his son's challenges at public school had become problematic. Though these issues were prominent, they were not foremost on his mind. He scanned his surroundings and noticed many troubling changes to the landscape he knew as a child. The government lackeys built planks into the trail system that acted as oversized stairs, and pressure-treated lumber bordered the trail as far as the eye could see. There were even different colored ribbons at duly assigned intersects every 100 feet to indicate your hiking path. Was it not his mountain anymore? Worse than all of this, when he arrived at the trailhead parking lot, Jasper saw something that had not been there when he was a child. It was a kiosk with a large sign showing the prices for various trail passes. Now, they will charge him admission to go hiking on his mountain. With a solid maple walking stick in hand, he approached the kiosk with a different idea. Hash, hash, hash. Jasper took another drink from his bottle and resumed his ascent up the mountainside. When he caught up to Carl, he noticed his son seemed agitated. "Dad, I'm cold," complained Carl, rubbing his forearms with his hands, trying to stave off a shiver. "That's okay, boy," said Jasper as he wrapped a small blanket around Carl's shoulders. "We're not far from a brook I played in when I was your age, and we can have a little fire and warm up before we head back. Sound good?" "Sure," said Carl, holding firm the newfound comfort, and they carried on. Hash, hash, hash. Jasper was employed at the processing plant for 20 years, and to think of starting over was almost too much to bear. That girl, Mandy, was his friend, and he didn't mean any harm when he talked to her at her station. And what girl doesn't want to hear a compliment or two about how police cars attended the Kane residence, responding to emergency calls regarding a domestic situation. Upon arrival, they found 13-year-old Jasper Kane standing on the front lawn with a 12-gauge shotgun at his feet, and Marie and Alfred Kane dead inside the home. Jasper's mom had begged for her life as he held her at gunpoint, claiming ignorance of the abuse Jasper had endured. But he remembered. He asked her a simple question before he put her down. "Hey, Mom, who held the camera?" Jasper was placed in custody and transferred to a psychiatric care facility for the next 10 years after the judicial process ran its course. His only complaint to hospital staff was of the musical strains that played incessantly over and over in his head. After he was released, he moved to the next county and met a girl named Angela. Hash, hash, hash. A motorcade of police in armor advanced along Route 73 and converged at the trailhead parking lot for Mount Vernon. An emergency call was placed regarding a vicious assault on the kiosk operator at the trail base. Authorities found kiosk operator Kevin Gilly beaten to death. The operator was discovered in a grisly pose, with his neck broken and trail passes stuffed inside his dislocated jaw. The authorities scanned the mountain from below and began staging an armed response at the base. All night, law enforcement was on the scene of a workplace shooting at the Walton Packing and Processing Plant. There were multiple casualties inside, but it was too early to know the death toll. The perpetrator escaped capture, but witnesses identified the shooter by name. Police tactical units were diverted when the call regarding the kiosk incident occurred. Authorities believed the workplace shooting and the murder of the kiosk operator might be related. Tactical members began their ascent of the mountain flanked by other uniforms interspersed amongst the trees, creating a horizontal human curtain that swept up the mountainside with a cold, hard purpose. The uniforms came upon a ghastly scene by a large rock face several hundred feet up the trail. 2 hikers were bloodied and lifeless, beaten to death, and seemingly posed in a manner that mocked decency. The authorities relentlessly pursued their quarry until they finally spied a lone figure. It was the subject, Jasper Kane, and he was in the crosshairs of justice. He sat by the mountain stream, talking to himself with his head in his hands. There was an assault rifle by his side and fully loaded magazines precariously close to the fire. A bloodied maple walking stick was close by. Jasper looked up from the flowing stream to the forest canopy above, and in it, he saw the play unfold before him with the all-too-familiar musical comp whispering on the milieu. Angela and Carl were laid in the bed, motionless, with obvious trauma. Angela's eyes were black, and blood had saturated the sheets below. A dreadful and soured scent hovered in the room. Carl was on his right side in a morbid embrace with his dead mother, the left side of his face shattered with a sheen of blood and tears. His body shivered as he mumbled his last words. "Daddy, I'm cold." Jasper procured a blanket from the closet and wrapped his son in it. Carl held onto the blanket as tightly as his broken limbs would allow, and Jasper kissed the top of his head, rubbed his arms lovingly, and walked away with the devil hand in hand. Jasper finished packing and placed his fully geared kit bag into the dark sedan. He headed onto the highway toward the processing plant where he once worked, and the music played. A uniform stretched out on the ground, a long gun trained on the subject, while others took their aim. Jasper heard twigs snapping in the dampness of the eve and felt eyes upon him. He buried his face in his hands and listened to the haunting tones that had plagued him his entire life. Then he took a deep breath and reached for his weapon. The music in his head became staccato, then still and stolid. His eyes fluttered a crooked rhythm as the percussion slowed, the light dimmed, and the music stopped.